Welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
And we are starting, of course, a new book today, and that is the fourth book in the Torah, the book of Numbers. There's a lot of narrative in this book. And in fact, you could almost divide this book into three parts. I may have mentioned this the last time we discussed this book. The first part is all upbeat, getting ready, getting prepared to enter the land of Canaan and conquer it. And that's why we're reading about the organization, and we'll continue today, about reading the organization of the tribes around the tent of meeting. And then there's a two-verse little section that is separated by upside-down nuns in the Sefer Torah. And then what follows after that is a series of tragedies that, apart from other things, mean that instead of going straight into the land of Canaan, the Israelites have to wander around in the wilderness for 40 years. It doesn't take 40 years to get from Egypt to the land of Canaan, even on foot. It might have taken maybe a little more than a year, and that's not because it takes that long. It's just that there was a large number of people to journey, and they were taking their time, and they were building the tabernacle in between, etc., etc. So their preparation time might have taken 2, maximum of 3 years before they went in, although here we're told at what point, at the very beginning of the book, at what point the Israelites are supposed to do this. So we can imagine that relatively shortly after that, they would have marched into the land of Canaan, with Moses, by the way, of course, right? All that changes in that third little section of the book of Numbers. It is one tragedy after another. But eventually we do get in, and that's a good thing. So we're talking about the encampment of the Israelites, and what I want to do here is see if I can find the shared, here it is. Just to show you, give you a picture of what it looked like. Here we are. So this is a nice illustration of what it looked like, right? So here we have bird's eye view, right? The tabernacle, the altar, the basin, the Holy of Holies right there. You can picture it to yourselves, the curtains that surrounded the tabernacle. And we read about how the Levites, this is the 3 tribes, the Kohatites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites, encamped immediately around this section, okay? And this would have been called, this inner part would have been called the Machane Shechina, and this part here, I believe, would have been called Machane Leviah. Moses and Aaron and Miriam would have lived here in this part, so that's there. And then after that, we have Machane Yisrael, the encampment of the Israelites, and we see Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun on the east side, and then going around in a clockwise direction, Reuben, Shimon, and Gad, Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh, or Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, and they tell you the camps, right? The first camp, the second camp, and the question is, how did they march? Because it sounds as if they marched in this order as they did here. But there's also another interpretation that says they simply marched in line, first, second, the tabernacle and the Levites then, and then the third and the fourth. And it sounds like that. So there's some ambiguity as to how actually it was done. So, but I wanted you to see this picture so that you could get a visual of what we're talking about right now, and that's what we're going to go into. So, v'chanu v'nei Yisrael ish al machanehu, that the children of Israel should encamp every man by his camp, ve'ish al diglo, and every person according to his standard, letziv otam, according to their troops. So here we have this word sava, right? Modern Hebrew meaning army. And so we can see this is all about getting ready for entry into the land of Canaan. Let's see if there's a Rashi on here. Here we are. The ish al diglo, and each man according to his standard. Kamo shahadgalim sturim b'sefer zeh, just as, so he says, just as the degalim, the standards, are arranged, sturim b'sefer zeh, in this book, shlosha shvatim l'chol degel, 3 tribes to every standard, and you saw that in the picture that we just had. So there were 3 tribes on each side. V'haleviim, and as for the Levites, yachanu saviv leMishkan ha'edut, they should encamp around the Mishkan of testimony, v'lo yeh ketzef, so that there not be destruction, al adat bnei Israel, on the community of the children of Israel. V'shamru haleviim et mishmeret Mishkan ha'edut, and the Levites should guard or stand guard, Shamru Mishmeret, they should stand guard Mishkan Ha'edut, of the tabernacle of the testimony. And it's quite possible that the Edut that is mentioned here might refer to the 10 commandments that were placed in the ark in the Holy of Holies. Let's see, here we go. V'lo yeh ketzef, so that there not be destruction. Im ta'asu k'mitzvotai, if you shall, this is Rashi speaking as it were for God, if you should perform my commandments, lo yeh ketzef, there will be no destruction. For im lav, and if not, sheyikansu zarim ba'avodatam zo, okay, and if there should be non-Levites, essentially we're talking about, who should enter into this service of theirs, of the Levites, yeh ketzef, there will be destruction. Kamoshe matzinu, as we actually saw, b'maaseh Korach, in the mutiny of Korach. And of course, that's in the latter part of this book. Again, one of the tragedies. And the words that are used, ki yatzak haketzef, for the destruction has begun, has started. And that's from Numbers chapter 17. Let's make sure all right. V'ya'asu b'nei Israel, and the children of Israel performed kachol asher tzivah Hashem et Moshe, according to all that which Hashem had commanded Moses, kenasu, indeed that they did it. And I wonder to myself when I read statements such as this, it's because so many times they didn't do it, and so it's worth mentioning that they did in this particular case. Just a thought. New chapter. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe ve'el lemor. And Hashem spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying. So if you want to go back to the previous sections of Numbers, again, what you do is you go to the YouTube site, my YouTube channels, and you just put in Bamidbar, and you should be able to get all the earlier lessons where we went over the actual census being taken of the Israelite males 20 years old and up. So we're on to the second part of this now, which is now that we have these numbers, now that we've taken this poll, we now can do something with it. And that's what's going to happen now. Ish al diglo, every man according to his standard. The word degel, we know sometimes we use it to translate the word flag, but otot, according to the signs, levet avotam, for their ancestral or their paternal homes, their paternal families, but here it's houses, right? Yachanu b'nei Israel. So the children of Israel should encamp. So this is again telling you specifically an organizational structure. Mineged saviv, and how do they do that? Opposite, saviv, around the ohel moed yachanu, around the tent of meeting, they shall encamp. So you take that picture that you had in mind, and that's what it's starting to describe. We're going to look at the Rashi. So, be'otot, according to the signs. Kol degel yihiyeh lo ot. Okay, so every flag should have if we want to translate ot as a sign, mapat tzvuah, what are we talking about? We're talking about a cloth that was colored, tluya bo, which was suspended within it. So they'd set up these standards, these cloths of different colors, okay? Tzva'o shel zeh, lo ketzva'o shel zeh. The color of this one wasn't the same as the color of that one. Tseva kol echad, and how do we know what colors they had? Kol echad, each one, kegavin avano hakvu'a b'choshen. It was similar to the color of its stone that had been set in the Choshen. So we read about these precious stones or semi-precious stones that were placed in the breastplate that the high priest wore, and each of them had a unique color, and it was according to that color that they then painted these standards by which the 12 tribes were encamped. So I think, of course, there's a lot of symbolism involved in all of this, that we're connecting these things and we're associating these different things. And we'll see another wonderful association in terms of how the camp was set up. Umitoch kach, and by means of this, yakir kol echad et diglo, every individual would be able to recognize his standard. Davar acher, another interpretation. Be'otot levet avotam. So using this phrase, in the signs according to their paternal houses. Ba'ot shemasar lahem Yaakov. In other words, they should set it up by means of the sign which Jacob, the patriarch, gave over to them. Yaakov avihem, Jacob their father. Keshenasuhu mimitzrayim, when they carried his remains from Egypt back to be buried in the land of Canaan in the cave of Machpelah. So how do we know this? Where do we get this idea? Shne'emar, as it states in Bereshit Nun, in Genesis chapter 50, Va'ya'asu banav lo, and his sons performed for him in this way, ka'asher tziva, just as he had commanded, just as Jacob had commanded them. In other words, when they carried his coffin from Egypt back to the land of Canaan, he had given them specific instructions, and we're going to see what those instructions were. And that's a reference. So the way in which they encamped around the Mishkan was similar to the way each one of the tribes themselves, or I should say, each one of the sons of Jacob was positioned around the bier. Yehuda v'Yisachar uZebulun, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, Yesiuhu in Hamizrach. They would carry him from on the eastern side. Reuven v'Shimon v'Gad, Reuven, Shimon, and Gad, min Hadarom, on the south side, v'chule, etc., etc. Kedeita b'Tanchuma, the Parsha zo. And Rashi is referring here to the Tanchuma. It's an Agadic midrash. It's still in existence. We still have it available, but in the Tanchuma, they discuss this particular midrash. Mineged, opposite. Merachok mil. In other words, each one of them each encampment should be a mile away. Kamoshin Emar Bihushua, as it states in the book of Joshua, Joshua chapter 3, Ach rachok yeh beinechem, there will be, or richuk, I'm not certain how it's pointed, but it says there needs to be a distance between you, uveinav, okay, and between him, between you and between them, ka'alpaim amah, approximately 2,000 cubits. Sheyuchlu lavo b'Shabbat, that they should be able to visit from one encampment to the other on Shabbat. So we have the idea of called the Tchum Shabbat, that is the Shabbat limit. And that is that you're not supposed to walk outside of the city limits more than 2,000 cubits. And that's the limit. So what happens is if you have another city that's less than 2,000 cubits or 2,000 cubits or less from the city you're leaving, then you can visit the other city. And likewise here between the tribes. Okay. All right. Lavo b'Shabbat Moshe v'Aaron uvanav. Okay, so he says Moses, Aaron, and his children, his sons, v'Haleviim, and the Levites, chonim b'samuch lo. So the tribes themselves were a mile away, or 2,000 cubits away. I believe here we're talking about from the Mishkan. And Moses and Aaron and the Levites were, as you could see from that picture, right by it. So let's go on back here. V'hachonim kedma, and those who encamped on the east side Mizracha. So Kedma Mizracha. Mizracha for sure means east, on eastwards. Kedma means in front here. Degel Machane Yehuda Litzivotam, the standard of the camp of Judah according to their troops. V'nasi Livnei Yehuda, and the head of the tribe of Judah, Nachshon ben Aminadav. You've heard of him. Nachshon ben Aminadav was from the tribe of Judah, and he in fact is mentioned here as the head of the tribe. Let's make sure let's take a quick look. Here we go. So Rashi is discussing the word kedma, lifnim, meaning in front. Hakruya kedem. That's what's referred to as kedem. The ezu zo. So what, and so the Torah goes on to say, and what is this entrance direction? Mizrachit. It's the eastern side, eastward side. V'hama'arav karui achor. And as for the western side, it is called achor, which means the back part, behind. Okay. Utzva'o, this going back to this verse here, and his troops, ufakudehem, according to their numbers, right? Arba'a v'shivim elef, so 74,000, v'sheish me'ot, and 600. So these are numbers that we had gotten from our earlier chapter, but here we are utilizing them in a way that organizes them and structures them around the tent of meeting. V'hachonim ala matei Issachar, and next to them, and encamped next to them, the tribe of Issachar, v'nasi livnei Issachar, and the chieftain of the tribe of Issachar, Netanel ben Suar. His name was Netanel ben Suar. And I think we do not have any Rashi until the next verse. Okay. Or following the next verse. Yeah, we'll see. So something we've mentioned already is that the tribe of Issachar were very, very wise people. They were students, they were great scholars. And so that is one reason why they were alongside Judah, who was the leader. And we talked about the relationship that Yisachar had with the tribe of Zevulun. And we're going to see that those three tribes were all together. And Zevulun were merchants, and they basically gave scholarship. they made scholarship available to the tribe of Issachar. They provided funds for them to be able to study. At any rate, going on, Utzva'o Ufukadav, and his troops and their numbers, I would translate it as this, right, as each were enrolled. Arba'a v'chamishim elef, 54,000, v'arba me'ot and 400. I took the liberty of writing these numbers down here. And now we go into Matei Zvulun, and the tribe of Zvulun, V'nasi livnei Zvulun, and the chieftain of the tribe of Zvulun, Eliav ben Chelon. His name was Eliav ben Chelon. Utzva'o ufukudav. And again, notice, by the way, the repetitious phrases. It's done in this sort of organized way. And his troops and their enrollment, their numbers, Shiva v'chamishim elef, 57 and 50,000. In other words, 57,000, v'arba me'ot and 400. Kol ha'pekodim l'machane Yehuda, and the entire enrollment to the tribe of Judah, in other words, their total, me'at elef, 100,000, ushmonim elef, and 80,000, v'sheshet alafim, and 6,000. So in other words, 186,000, v'arba me'ot, and 400, letzivotam, according to their troops, rishona Yisa'u. They should journey first. They should lead off the march. And I'm going to put in our arrow here. And let's do this. And we'll stop the share in a moment. Let's make sure we're in the right place here. Stopping the share. And are there any comments before I stop the recording? Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are Kedma and Mizrach interchangeable?
Actually, I think they are.
Yeah, because Yama v'Kedma tzefona v'negba.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
But Rashi, thank you. But Rashi, I think, is telling us that there's an additional meaning to the Kedma, and that is that it was at the entrance of the tent of meeting. It was in that direction where the tent of meeting opened, where the gate.
And that they went forward. They were the front of the line.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's possibly included in that as well. Harlan, did you have a question?
Yeah. The east was Judah, and he was a leader. Each leader was appointed by God. There was 12 leaders, right? There was 12 people for each tribe. And the east went first, and the south went second, and I think the north went third, and the west went fourth.
Clockwise, west and then north.
Clockwise, okay.
Clockwise.
And it was chosen that the people that were 20 years old and over were chosen to fight, in the land of Canaan. But you had to be 20 years old and over.
Correct.
And male.
Males 20 years. They were the ones.
Yeah, the males, yeah. And there were 603,000 males to fight the Canaanites.
We'll get all those totals. Yes, exactly. The Levites were not included in this particular.
The Levites weren't counted. They were counted later on to take care of the Torah, the Mishka.
Yes,
but they weren't counted for going to war.
No, they were not part of the
lovers, not fighters.
Well, they were fighting with their mouths.
Yes.
Well,
or something.
Yeah, well, when the Torah was in front of the tribes, they won. When the Torah was not in front of them, they lost. So the Torah was always, the Mishka was always in front of the people when they went to war.
So it wouldn't have been the Mishkan. Just to clarify a little bit, you're right in general. Often they would, apparently they did take the ark, But the truth is, what you were saying, Harlan, had more validity to it. It wasn't so much the physical ark. It was whether or not they were performing the Torah. So that, in saying that the Torah was in front of them is probably a good way of putting it. In other words, because there was one time, we read about this in the book of Samuel, how the ark was captured. So the ark wasn't effective in and of itself. It had to have the support of the Jewish people practicing the Torah. It's like synagogues. We can build these beautiful synagogues, but unless we inhabit them, they are nothing but shells. But when we go into them, we can be inspired by their architecture and by being within that space, and we can be influenced by that space. But in and of themselves, they are relatively little value from the religious point of view. And I'm going to stop here with our recording and look forward to tomorrow.